All right, people of the internet, welcome to Atheist Edge. And today I'm joined by Ken Ammi. Hey, Ken, how you doing today?
Very well. Thank you very much. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Thank you so much for joining me. I have had a chance to watch a few of your other videos, some of the debates you've had. I'm a little so. Are you are a regular Christian, or are you some other kind of denomination?
Oh, I don't have a problem with saying regular Christian.
No. What would you say? How would you describe your theology in general?
Well, I mean, I'm Jewish, so I came to the recognition that Jesus is the Messiah, kicking and screaming, so that now, I mean, every label has baggage, but that's why I was saying I don't have a problem being referred to or thought of as just a good old-fashioned Christian.
Good old fashioned Christian. Not a so. Kind of, do you subscribe to like Catholicism at all, or
Oh no,
are you
no.
against them in any kind of way, or are you anti any of the other denominations?
Well, that's very much of an within the family in-house type of thing. So, um, I mean, bottom line, I suppose, is that the three main branches of Christianity, Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Protestantism, all agree on the Nicene Creed. And so that alone is a major factor that unites as much as well. I mean, everybody's got their own flavor. For example, there's a Korean church here in town. And I would definitely never attend it. It's just because it's meant to service a very particular portion of the community. And I don't know Korean, so that's not for me.
You do a lot of talking about what do you call it, paranormology, right? That's the
Oh
term.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
something you're still into these days?
And it's funny you would have picked up on that. That is, I suppose, in a manner of speaking, something that I've been interested in ever since I was a child. And so, yes, yeah. I mean, I've tried to specialize in what I term it systematic biblical paranormology. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, as far back as, I don't know, when I was in the sixth grade, I used to love going to this place that's called the library, where they have these things called books that are like printed on paper. And
Yeah, ancient technology.
yeah, I don't know, but sometimes you have to explain these things to the younger crowd. And yeah, I would go and I would read all about UFOs, aliens, and witchcraft and cryptozoology and just all the mysteries of the world. That was really what I enjoyed. And yeah, a piece of me has always maintained an interest in those areas.
And have you ever had any kind of experiences with any of these paranormal entities?
Um, Maybe not enough to really speak of widely, but yeah, I guess just a little bit. I mean, I'm not talking about seeing any chupacabra out in the woods or anything like that.
Any demon possessions, visitations from the angels, or anything like that?
No, I mean, I would definitely say that I think I've experienced sleep paralysis, and no, there's a certain sense of sensing a presence, as it were.
Hmm.
And that's especially interesting when you just have a totally subjective feeling, and then the person who is with you in the room is looking at you like, something's going on here, and they feel it too. That's really interesting.
Hmm.
But no, I can't say I've seen any heads spinning around 360 or anything,
Okay,
anything
so it
too
sounds like
exciting.
you don't have any kind of experiences that you would lean on as like conclusive, right?
No, and also all this stuff. Like I said, I've been reading about this stuff since the sixth grade or so, and in a manner of speaking, nothing's really changed. I mean, Bigfoot people are still telling their Bigfoot stories, and UFO people are still telling their UFO stories, and so be it. It is what it is.
So why do you believe in it?
Oh, I mean, I don't know what it would be, but just researching it or looking into what people are saying, that's not necessarily an indication that I believe anything like that. Um, just an area of interest.
So
So, for instance, I've had
I guess I
my
should just ask, like, straight out: do you believe that these entities are roaming around on the Earth today?
well, again, I mean, I've mentioned quite a few different entities, so I think some of them are, but some of them wouldn't even be worth me saying yay or nay. It's one of those things, like this whole alien phenomena, right? One of my big pet peeves is that I wouldn't even begin talking about quote unquote aliens until we spend some time ironing out what on earth are we talking about. Because if it's one thing that served me well is defining terms before jumping into the middle of a discussion, because I think you'll notice that a lot of times, whether you're involved or you're just a bystander, like reading a comment section, it's a tendency for people to jump into discussions, and I'm reading them or hearing them and thinking, how come nobody's defining their terms, right? I mean,
Right.
people are using a certain term to mean even more than one thing and not elucidating that for the audience along the way. And uh, there's also the phenomenon of talking past each other, where a lot of it seems to be like, if you guys just took a moment to say, what do you mean when you say whatever issue or word or phrase? Because when I use that phrase or word, I mean this. Oh, okay, then now we can start, right? That's why I'm saying people talk about aliens. Who knows? They could mean quite a few different things. So
Yeah, I guess they
if
could. Aliens, I think,
yeah,
is easier than supernatural.
well,
The word supernatural does a lot of heavy lifting, and it's not really
yeah,
very clear what it means. Well, how would you define it?
supernatural.
Yeah, or do you even use
Well,
that term?
it depends. I mean, it has. So, for instance, one reason I opted for referring to paranormology instead of like supernaturalism or supernaturalology is because I'm more thinking along the terms of those beings that we are told are running like parallel, right, to our reality, paranormal, parallel to the normal, so that maybe they're living right alongside of us, and that's the whole point of them, is they're inhabiting our or a similar reality. It's just that they're different enough from us that we don't ever interact with them personally, or maybe on occasion we do. Whereas supernatural, right, that would be like super, beyond, above, like the meta level, to the natural. And it would be like, for instance, God would be the only supernatural being, with any other beings he might have created, like, say, I don't know, angels. Those would be paranormal, because they're living in that reality that was created, whereas God wouldn't. He would be up above and beyond this. But
So
anyhow,
you've
this
got this
is
like hierarchy of realms, let's say, where there's
right.
this superstructure, and then within the superstructure there are parallel realms, let's say, and ours is one of those.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And so this is good. This is part of. I'm I'm glad you brought up these issues, because if we don't even talk about anything else, just talking about how to think categorically is important. How to think within categories, and how to speak and write in ways where we're defining our terminology. Where, so for me as an author, I need to let my audience know what I'm talking about. And I should not really assume that when I use a certain word or a certain term or phrase, oh, my audience is going to know what I mean, so I'll just use it and go about my business writing my narrative. Well, no, at some point, hopefully early in my book, about whatever it may be, I need to tell my audience, hey, I'm writing to you about thus and such. And so when I use the term thus and such, this is what I mean by it. And then you can go on through the rest of the text and understand that when that word or phrase comes up, I already told you what I mean by it, right? That's an issue I actually notice a whole lot, and it causes a lot of frustration and wasted time and arguments, because people are just not setting the table for a discussion. They're just kind of jumping into the middle of it. And of course, in this cyber world of the interwebs, man, it's way too easy to just jump in the middle of a discussion and start arguing with everybody. And it kind of becomes apparent that, I'm not sure that everybody involved in this discussion even really is focused on what the issue is supposed to be. And then you also get issues such as what I call the word swap, right? Hey, let's see. I'm not going to understand what you mean unless you use a word with which I'm familiar and I'm happy with, right? It's like, well, but if I have a different way of understanding what I mean by what we're talking about, then that's what I need to tell you about. And maybe you'll cross over and use my terminology. Maybe I'll cross over and use yours, but it's almost beyond simple words. It's about the concept behind them, bottom line, right? So
Sure.
if I have a concept and I want to call it A, or I want to call it one, or I want to call it chinchilla, it's those words aren't as important as what's the concept behind it, right? What is it that I'm talking about, almost regardless of the terminology that I'm using, because being bilingual, I mean, it's just been obvious to me that, it, as far as I know, any language that's ever existed, any one word or phrase can refer to more than one thing, and any one thing can be referred to by multiple words and multiple phrases.
Yeah, it
That's
certainly is a
why,
weakness of
yeah.
language in my opinion.
What's that?
But so okay, so we've got an idea though of what
No, I'm
your
sorry, I
idea of.
didn't hear that last part, the last statement you made.
I think I had said something, but that's the weakness of language in general, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why we need to work at it a little bit, right? And say, what do you mean by that? Here's what I mean by that. Let's just at least start by defining terms, and that does make it easier.
Yeah. Okay. So we're defining supernatural as the uh overstructure of reality, or the base reality, let's say. That's probably the best way to say it, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Okay. And then ours is an emergent reality from there,
Right.
right? Um so yeah, what is it that gives you cause to believe that that actually is the case, that this is not the base reality?
Well, one thing just about my life and my personality is all I could tell you is, for some reasons, I seem to have always um, intuited that there's something more than the world that I was seeing around me. And again, I'm not going into the paranormal. That's not even. It's just that I've always kind of questioned, and I can honestly say that I've been a hardcore skeptic since I was in the single digits. Things just didn't seem right, or I found out things that I was told were true, and then I found out they weren't. And incidentally, by skeptic, I mean like a true and honest skeptic. Speaking of terminology, I have come to find that a lot of people who call themselves skeptics are really cynics. And unfortunately, they give skepticism a bad name because skepticism would be about exactly what I've been describing, which is like, hey, I just found out that something I was told was true is not true. And so that makes me question the next time I'm told something is true, is it really so? And it makes me wonder, or it makes me try to suss it out or what have you. And so, for instance, I'm aware that there's a lot of videos on the interwebs where atheists explain things such as that their parents told them that there was such a thing as Santa Claus, and then when they found out that there isn't because their parents were really doing the job of Santa, that really brought them to this place that I'm referring to as skepticism. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, for me, it wasn't Santa Claus. For me, in part, it was los ratoncitos, as we call them, which is the the South American version of the Tooth Fairy. Right? We didn't have something as fancy as the Tooth Fairy. We had the little rats. Right? We got rats that would play the same function, but it's just
Rat fairies.
we don't get beautiful fairies. We get vermin, you know.
Wow.
But it's
Okay.
the same concept, right? You leave your tooth under the pillow, they bring you money, whatever. But then finding out that actually my parents were doing that. Oh no, I wasn't having that. That was like shocking to me that I would be told that something that was the case turned out to not be the case. You know, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Mm.
Is these existential moments where even as a child realizing, hey, I just had a paradigm shift because it's just been revealed to me that something I believed was true wasn't true. And now what, right? And that's, I think, maybe way eventually down the line, that's probably why I started looking at all those paranormal subjects, is to kind of see if there was something else, something beyond. And I could see how that affects me to this day. I mean, you know, when I call myself a hardcore skeptic, you'd be shocked at how skeptical I can be. Um, but again, there's ways of dealing with it to the point that you're not just in denial mode, but you're more open to sussing things out as much as I suppose anybody would be
Did I miss
capable
it?
of.
Did you give a definition of skeptic?
Well, I juxtaposed it with cynic, and I think that what I was explaining is that, yeah, it refers to somebody who's open to sussing things out. So
Yeah.
it's not
I think I'd
like
like to define it something like a person who requires articulatable reasons for accepting a premise.
something like
Maybe
that would definitely
that's not
be
strong
fair
enough,
enough.
probably, but
You know,
something
yeah,
along that
yeah.
lines. But probably
Right.
more than
It
that.
has
But
to
yeah.
be a workable thing, right? So there's some mysteries in life. Obviously, we're never going to uncover, and that's just how it is. And then there's some things you could really work out hard and come to the truth about a thing, and then there's some things that we all just believe because it just seems standard and it seems fair enough to just believe it because I'm not about to spend my life uh, investigating every possible detail about existence because then not only would I not get very far, I would spend my life doing nothing but that.
So you went through this skeptical, or you're in a skeptical phase. Are you done with skepticism or what?
Oh, well, no, I don't think that'll ever go away. And in a way, it's very comforting to me. And it helps me understand people, right? So, for instance, when I'm dealing with atheists, for example, and they're asking some really hard reality questions about reality, I'm very empathetic. I mean, I've been there, done that. I'm not an outsider to that kind of thinking, and I'm not an outsider to asking questions and demanding answers, and going through these very existential issues because been there, and in a lot of ways, I still am. So it kind of helps me, honestly, to be able to communicate with people, even though, I mean, when it comes to atheism, I think it's kind of a whole different ballgame because on that view, then, yeah, there's no premise for investigating anything or coming to facts or relying on evidence. I mean, there's no real reason to do any of that on
Why?
atheism
Sorry,
itself.
there's no reason. I agree that atheism in and of itself does not entail any of those things, but that
Well,
wouldn't
there
be
you go.
anybody's sole ideology. Nobody is only an atheist.
Yeah, and well, there's various reasons for that, but I think the issue is that it's like a core, right? It's like a core, and then that core branches out
Hmm.
into absolutely everything else that you will ever think about, and it affects the way you think about those things, and it informs you as to how you should think about those things, which is ironic because on atheism there's no universal imperatives, but there's really no way around the fact that and it will inform you as to how you should think about. So,
Can
for
you give me an
example,
example of something? Yeah, go ahead.
sure. So let's say I say, "Hey, I'm an atheist." Okay, so I mean, whatever denomination of atheism I adhere to, let's just generically refer to atheism. So now I'm going to think about mathematics. I'm going to think about cosmogony. I'm going to think about biology. I'm going to think about whatever it is. By definition, if I want to remain consistent to atheism, even though on atheism there's no universal imperative to be consistent, then I'm going to bring that with me. I'm going to take that baggage with me, that core. And for example, if I'm thinking about anthropology, I'm not going to think that human beings were created by God. I can't. I made a commitment to disregard that because I am an atheist. So that's it. That informs me as to how I should think about humanity, which is that we're not created. So then maybe I'll go looking for some kind of story that we might call a theory about how humans came to be. You see, it's almost like if you have a worldview, let's just say your view of the world, however you view absolutely anything and everything in existence, that core belief, that sort of dogma of atheism is going to tell you how you're going to be thinking about those things, and it's going to restrict you to certain patterns of thinking.
I don't think that
See
that's the
what I mean?
case at all, and especially like with the example that you gave. For instance, what was it? Finding meaning, or no, that wasn't it. What was the example in a nutshell? Something about.
Um,
Go ahead.
well, I brought up anthropology and how you would think about humanity, how
Oh
we
yeah,
came
yeah.
to be.
Like
Yeah,
we're human
right.
beings came to be, right? There are atheists out there that think that we were seeded by aliens. Um, there are people who subscribe to something panentheism. So that's not exactly a total atheist, but it's not a theist in a traditional sense. There are many different ways that atheists can think about these things. There are objective, there are moral realists and moral relativists, and I don't really see any solid through line other than the rejection of the God claim.
Well, but so for instance, if we are created by aliens, that just moves the issue one step back. It could still be an atheistic worldview. But then the question becomes, how did aliens come to be? And then you're just like in a
I
infinite
think most people don't even go
regress.
that far. They usually stop
Yeah,
at the
well, exactly
alien
right.
seed.
But I'm saying, so for instance, you get somebody like Richard Dawkins, who I think we can affirm is a pretty committed atheist, saying, well, life could have come to be because aliens created it, and that's the problem he falls into, is this infinite regress. But the point being that it could still be an atheistic view. It's just that aliens would have created us, and then they would have come about in some completely accidental, naturalistic, materialistic way. And then, yeah, I mean, you could certainly say that atheists can hold to whatever um, moral view that they want, but that doesn't mean that it's in keeping with their atheism. In fact, often they come up with stuff because they don't like the moral view that would be based on atheism itself. So they like to come up with something that seems a little more workable, or sounds better, or just feels better, or however one might want to term such a thing.
More logical.
The point being, let's say that regardless of atheism for a second, really any worldview, which technically would entail um, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, or you could just water down the language a little bit to truth, logic, and ethics, or just think about worldview in terms of, well, what's my view of the world? Regardless of what it is, it'll always contain a core, and that core would be like the central dogma. That then
And you
again,
think that
it
atheism
kind
is
of,
a
yeah.
central dogma?
What's that?
You think that atheism is a central dogma? I don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think that something like skepticism is closer to the central than to skepticism would then uh, spurn, or not spurn. What's the word? It would you know
Yeah.
generate
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
atheism. If you are a skeptic, you would become atheistic. If that's your conclusion, the evidence that you come across, I
Well,
the
but
worldview I have is people lie, people are mistaken, people make mistakes, people are fallible. So I'm not going to just believe anything anybody says. I'm going to look for evidence. And that's the skeptical worldview, you might say. And then from there, I look for evidence of the claims of God, and I don't see any, so I accept atheism, or I become atheist, or I call myself an atheist, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, but that raises fundamental level epistemology issues, such as, well, why do you appear to merely assert a universal imperative that we should only believe in things that have been evidenced?
I'm sorry, can you say it one more time?
Yes, so that view you just proposed, that you look for evidence, can't find it, so you're going to call yourself an atheist, that presupposes a hidden assumption, which is the implication that we ought to only believe in things that have been evidenced. So that opens up a whole can of worms as to, well, whoever said that's any kind of standard.
We ought to only believe things that have evidence. Okay, well, what are the other options?
Well, the
If we're
other
not going
options
to if
are,
we're not going to take that view, what could we do?
well, you could do something as simple as just believing whatever you want because you like how it sounds or feels or it makes you happy. I mean,
And if
it's
we do that, what will the results be?
actually, I think we have a lot of people in this world that do just that.
I mean, like for instance, if we were to say we don't have to have evidence to convict somebody of murder, well, then we can just start throwing anybody in jail, right? Just because we don't like them.
Yeah, and a lot of governments have done exactly that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
we have,
but
haven't we?
then, see, this opens up a chasm, which is a rabbit hole about, well, why are we speaking of that with the merely implied hidden assumption that there's something wrong with that?
Why are we assuming that there's something wrong with putting people in prison when they have not committed murder?
Right.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of angling it towards the what is the basis of morality? That's where we're going with this.
Um,
Like, why have any morals whatsoever? Pretty much,
well,
right?
you see, one thing I'm appreciating about this conversation is that we're going step by step and we're digging in because I'm tempted to say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But then again, part of me wants to say, well, no, let's stop and we need to talk about what is morality and what are ethics and what's the difference between them if there is any. So then, see, for me, uh, everything kind of opens up a new little rabbit hole, and it's like, well, gosh, is this a really good time to get in to go digging into that one? Because
I
then we're
mean,
leaving the one we were supposed to be digging into.
we can. I can't
So
speak for all atheists on that, though. I have
no,
my own personal conception of what I think morality is. I
yeah,
advocate for that on this show sometimes, and I think that I'm on the right track. I don't have like confidence in the sense of like this is some kind of theory or something like that. It's my hypothesis, and I'm working on it. But I can't speak for all atheists. I think that morality comes from the natural interaction of agents. That things exist that have desires and wants, and they come against each other, and then morality just forms from there, emergent. Like
like a lion killing a zebra or a lion killing a human. They're just interacting. It's all moral.
it's like when two atoms rub together, there's friction. You get enough atoms together, you have a flow of you get a let me start over. Okay, so you have water atoms in a pipe. Okay, they're in the pipe and they're moving. If they're moving against each other in a chaotic faction, there's going to be friction, there's going to be turbulence, and the flow will not be it will be a turbulent flow. And when you have the proper scenario, then you can get a laminar flow. Everything just flows nice and neatly. And I'm thinking that morality in reality is something like that. It's something like achieving a laminar flow with the in the analogy, we are the atoms of the water molecules. The pipe is the universe, something like that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Of course, that's digging a little side rabbit hole. Uh,
Yeah, it's a whole other rabbit hole. But
no,
I mean,
because now
can we
now we
just
would have,
assume that it
well,
is wrong? Why do we have to do we have to deal with the why it's wrong to lock somebody up for murder, or why it's wrong to think of things without evidence? I mean, isn't it kind of obvious that evidence makes it better?
well,
Like, why do we
that's
have to go
just
that
the
far?
right. That's actually do want to talk about morality for a second, but that's just the issue. Is now we're dealing with a merely presupposed hidden assumption about that we know what's better or worse or turbulent or not turbulent. Why should we say not turbulent is better, right? Why should we say not putting people in prison who don't deserve it better, right? You see what I mean? I'm not merely just picking on your words. I'm just pointing out um, how easy it is to make succinct statements that are actually, when we think about them and dissect them, absolutely jam packed with existential assertions
No, I totally
and
understand. It's very difficult to
yeah,
speak of these
yeah,
things in an
yeah,
intelligent
yeah.
way, and
So,
that is
so
the
for
reason why. Like, I had a conversation with Mark not too long ago, and we were talking about the same exact subject, and I really don't have a way of defeating him in any kind of way. I can't beat his arguments. His he has a view of morality that is valid, and I have my own, and it's just we're gonna have to hammer it out. But I mean, either way, if we let's say we give it to God, right? Let's say that God is the source of the morality. Aren't we just kicking the can down the road, saying, okay, now where does God get the idea of morality from?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm going to go back to what I said before. Even if we don't really iron anything out, I do think that this conversation is very important because we're at least digging into how to even have a discussion, right? And stopping along the way and picking on things such as, well, when you said this, it implied that, and if anything, it's like a tutorial about how to slow down and take discussion step by step. So, for instance, I'm going to avoid your question for just a second.
If you could
So,
answer that question right there. That
oh,
Mark had asked, how do you define free thinker? If you get a chance, I'd appreciate it.
well, I mean, uh, I know it's probably tempting to think of the term free thinker as one word, which has its own baggage. I mean, I think of it more in terms of two words, free and thinker. Like being a skeptic, I'm free to really think about whatever I want in whatever manner I want, and I mean the history of free thinking is, especially in modern times, is pretty varied to the point that you have definitions of free thinkers that include deists. So I mean, that's just a little taste of how I think about it. But
Okay.
what I was going to say, so for instance, um, when I think about morality, I want to start with the word, and I'm breaking it down to understand that its etymology is that it refers to the mores. And mores, it's a mere description of whatever people just so happen to be doing. I mean, if they're lopping off heads for fun, that's the mores, because we're just describing what they're doing. We're not yet at the point of talking about right or wrong. It's just a description, right? So, in that sense, morality, when understood that way, it is situational, it's relative, it's subjective, it's intrinsic, right? Um, Although here's where you have these linguistics issues, because there are people who will refer to, for example, absolute morals or universal morals, in which case they're speaking in a different category. They're talking about absolutes and universals. They're not just using the term to mean, um, you know, tentative, relative, situational. So that's why I'm laying that out, so that we learn to pick up on these clues. Oh, hey, this person's qualifying their terms in a certain way. So then, when we think about ethics, that refers to the ethos. So this would not be mere descriptions, but they're actually prescriptions, prescribing a certain kind of behavior, right? So that the ethics, the ethos, would be what is absolute and objective and universal. Although here again, you have people who say, well, ethics is just a body of morals. Uh, So then this is, like I said at the beginning, if I use the term a or one or chinchilla, it's not as important as the meaning behind it. So let's call morals A and ethics B. It doesn't matter, A or B. The point is that we understand that there's a difference between description and prescription. So that, for instance, if we look at the cultures around the planet, they have different morals, but they all share the same ethics. I'll just give you a quick example, because my point here is that morality is subjective, ethics are objective. Morality is situational and relative. Ethics are absolutely universal. So you think about, for instance, that one culture's hero could be another culture's villain, right? That's pretty common, right? So,
Right.
for instance, you have Native Americans who say, hey, person X is a villain. And you have people of Spanish ancestry saying, no, no, he's a hero. And the natives will say, well, he's a villain because he conquered us. And the Spaniards will say, well, he's a villain because he conquered us, and the Spaniards will say, no, he's a hero because he conquered you, right? It's a pure contradiction. They're at odds because their morals are different. However, notice that there's actually something upon which they agree, which is the ethics, the ethos, and that is tyranny or villainy is to be condemned, while heroism is to be praised. See, so they're agreeing at the fundamental level, and
Yeah,
this is where,
villainy is by definition bad.
well, uh, yeah, exactly. So, who is a villain? Who is a hero? That's a separate issue. That's the difference between ontology and epistemology. The nature and essence of the thing would be that villainy is bad. Who is a villain? That's epistemic. That's why they argue about it, because they have different views.
You don't think
So
that that's
that
ontological? It seems like
no,
that they have a totally different idea of what a hero is.
well, no, that's the point. Is um, they share an idea of what a hero is. They just attribute it to different actions or different people, right? So um, we Spaniards think that it's good that our hero conquered you, because that's what heroes do, and they set
Heroes
you
conquer.
natives straight. Where the natives are saying, well, no,
Heroes
the
do not
hero
conquer.
is the natives who were fighting against your guy, So
Yeah,
it's that,
that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
It's like it seems like ontologically, Group A has the definition of hero, conqueror. Group B has the definition of hero, not conqueror.
right. And the point is that what underlies that is agreement on the fundamental issue, that there is such a thing as villainy, there is such a thing as heroism. One is definitely to be praised, one is definitely to be condemned. And then you have to do the hard work of figuring out, well, which is which.
I kind of see where you're coming from though, because like I think I
Yeah.
said something like this similar in that conversation with Mark, where it's like morality is just the fact that there is good and bad. We have these ideas of good and bad, and that's universal. That's everywhere. Everybody's got a hero. Everybody's got villain. So that we can all agree on. But then the ethos or ethics or whatever is how you apply them in specific contexts.
And that's my point about how the words may not necessarily matter. Call those two views A and B or one and two. That it doesn't matter. The point is that we recognize that there is ontological agreement regardless of chronology, geography, or theology, or lack thereof throughout history, while there's disagreement on the level of application, like epistemology and understanding how those things work and how they're applied. So again, this is more about ironing out not just the terminology, but the concepts that we're talking about. This is why I wouldn't jump into a discussion just like I gave in. What I'm doing
No,
right now
that's
is
fair
not
enough. I agree.
jumping. Yeah, yeah. It's just another
So
example
I,
of let's slow down and define terms and think about. Excuse me, I think I just burped into the mic.
it's fine. So I think the main concept that we need to define before we can do anything productive is to define what the words good and bad mean when we say that.
Right. So yeah, that would definitely be um, based on a mere ontological assertion that there are such things. Then we would do the epistemic work of ironing that out. Let me just give you an example from pop culture. Um,
Go ahead.
so, by the way, keep your eye on the chat, because I don't want to distract from our discussion just to ask you how long we were going to go tonight and stuff like that. So maybe we could
We
do
can go as
that.
long as you like. If you have a heart out, we can end it at that point. I usually go around an hour and a half, maybe two.
Oh, okay, okay. So, for instance, when we think about the Star Wars mythos, right? The Star Wars franchise. And we're always told it's an epic struggle between good and evil. Well, it's not.
Yeah, I
because in
remember you
Star.
making this point in one of those videos because
Oh,
you
okay.
said
Well,
that
then,
Star Wars doesn't have anything to do with God, so therefore it can't have anything to do with good. So God is good. They're equivalent terms to you.
right. So sorry that I'm repeating an example I already gave, but just for the audience. So uh, in Star Wars, there's the Force, and the Force is not a personal being, right? It's just an amoral, aethical, a personal force. And the Sith use it towards their ends, and the Jedi use it towards their ends. And so the Sith think that they are virtuous and the Jedi are evil, and the Jedi think they're virtuous and the Sith are evil, right? And there's in that worldview, there's no real way to iron out who is what. They're just both will to power. They're both tapping into this force and using it, and nobody can really say which is the good and which is the bad.
You either believe that. You can't say which one's good or bad.
Not on that, not as, I guess, an internal critique. You can't. You can just observe. Well, you could just be moral. You could just say, hey, the Sith are doing this, the Jedi are doing that.
I
But
think the
with,
people of what was it? Which planet did they destroy in Empire?
oh, yeah, I don't remember the name of it, but yeah, I
I
know the
believe
one you're
those people would
talking about.
disagree with you. I'm pretty sure they know who's bad and who's good.
Well, yeah, but they wouldn't be around to disagree.
Sure, that's true.
But no, because then, okay, fine, let's go with that. Then if they say, hey, it was wrong for you to have destroyed us, the question is, well, why? I mean, that's a hidden assumption. It's a merely asserted positive affirmation that there is an absolute good and absolute bad, but there is not within that system. Just as there's not within atheism, which is why atheists have to uh,
I
sort
mean,
of,
yeah, atheism is simply the rejection of theism, in my
well,
definition. Do you have another definition?
traditionally atheists have had other definitions. So, for example,
You
the
can
one
say
you
it's the
just gave,
assertion that there is no God,
well, um,
if you want to be uncharitable. But okay, let's go with that then. Okay, so the assertion that
no,
there
I
is no
mean,
God, I don't see
well,
how that has anything to do with anything else as far as worldview goes. Like, um, I still believe in objective good. I don't believe in absolute universal good. I believe that context and situations dictate how the atoms need to be rearranged for the most productive system you want to make. But I don't think that there's no such thing as good or bad.
but you see, you just snuck in an entire concept that is called productive. So now I hope we don't do it because I'm sick of rabbit holes, but they'll probably keep happening. That's another that's another rabbit hole right there.
Yeah, I
Is
understand.
yeah,
We're on the same page as far as
yeah.
morality being very difficult to define. Absolutely.
Well,
But how does God help?
yeah, but it's not just that. It's that with a atheist core, saying something like, "Oh my goodness." I know it's later where you are than where I am, but I've been up since before 6 a.m. and my brain's getting tired. What was the word you just used? Productive.
Productive?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another smuggled in baggage in and of itself that contains a lot of things. So that we're
If I was writing, I probably wouldn't have used that word. I probably would have used something like provides utility or something like that. I would
yeah,
use some kind of utilitarian kind of framework to explain that concept.
but then again, I'm looking behind all that. I'm not just you can swap all the words you want, and I'm still going to have the same issue. Is how do you even
How do you
determine
decide
on
what's
that?
productive? Right. So my definition of goodness is that which promotes the perpetual survival of all living things.
Well, I'm sure that sounds nice, but I definitely don't have a problem killing billions of bacteria on my hand on a daily basis.
You don't
And
have a problem with it, and that sure there are different. There's a spectrum. It's a wide spectrum, but I mean, discriminately destroying all bacteria would be a bad thing,
yeah,
right?
and by the way, I'm not. I wasn't implying that you're being that simple-minded. I
I
didn't
know.
doubt for
I
a
get it.
single second
It's
that you
very
were
convoluted. I understand. We have to
not
dig into
necessarily.
all those terms and explain how I got to all those things, and it's going to be a
Yeah,
process, but we'll get there.
yeah. And it's not even that it's convoluted. It's just I understood what you meant. I was just pointing that out as a detail that could be picked on. So I think one of the issues I would say is that when you tell me I, Kaz, think thus and such, I might say, okay, and what do I care?
I
What do
mean, the
I
question
care?
is whether or
What's
not I'm right or wrong. If I'm wrong, then you shouldn't care. If I'm right, then you should.
Yeah, but then that raises the question of right and wrong, and why should we pick one over the other? Um, so the issue with this atheist core is when it comes to, okay, if we bottom line this, and I mean, regardless of to which atheist cosmogenic myth you might hold, it's not really that relevant at this point, but that basically reality would just has come about just the way it came about. It just happens to have happened the way it happens to have happened. And so truth then would be that which comports to reality on a correspondence theory of truth, which I think is fair enough. But then reality is just the byproducts of accidents, right? It's the furniture of the universe, as some philosophers would put it. But then why does it become some sort of universal imperative to adhere to the byproducts of accidents, such as truth and reality and facts?
Truth and reality are the byproducts of accidents. Well, I mean, if that's all that there is, then that's all that there is.
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
why would you? You're looking for an alternative when there is none.
Well, um, I'm not even at the point of looking for an alternative at the moment. I'm just saying that brute fact A exists. Okay, I can ontologically affirm that, but why should I care? Why should I adhere to it? In other words, why should I line up my life to those things that are true when those things that are true are just byproducts of accident? They're not created, not designed, not the end result of a volitional plan. They just are. And I don't see where the universal imperative is to then say, therefore, all of humanity should adhere to this furniture of the universe that was put into place happenstantially. It's just there, and it's an accidental result.
Sorry, I'm switching my headphones real quick.
No, no worries. Just let me know if you can't hear me, because we went through what, a half hour of battling the StreamYard audio before we could actually get started. So I'll just keep yapping just to make sure that you end up hearing me while you do that. So I guess the point being, if on an atheist view the universe came about in some or another unmeant, uncaused, uncreated, undesigned way, just accidentally, then there's no universal imperative really to do anything. Not even to be alive, because on that view, even the survival instinct just happens to have happened. It just happens to have come about. And I think that's just one of the main problems is there's no universal imperatives. There's only emotively subjective personal preferences du jour, which is what creates the problem of saying things like that. We should go with less friction.
Sorry.
We should go with being more productive, etc. It seems like you can hear me now. You're back.
Yeah, I can
I
hear you
can
now.
definitely
Sorry.
hear you. Okay, yeah, you
Okay,
are
so
back.
there's no universal imperative under atheism.
Right.
Okay, do you need one?
Well, I think we need one, because if not, the alternative is when you tell me, hey, I think, right?
What if
Subjective.
what if the
I
imperative only exists at a biological level? What if it only exists at a societal level? What if it only exists on a personal level? What if that's the only place it exists in the universe, in reality? What if that is the case? Then what?
Then it would be just, I'm not even sure what an imperative at a biological level would mean, but it just in general, then, okay, then it's like when you say, I, Chaz, think this about morality, and I'm going back to what I asked before, and I say, okay, so what? There's an accidentally existing ape grunting stuff at me in a language we call English, and why should that be the least bit impressive to me that I and all of humanity ought to adhere to it? Right? There's no such thing. There's just
So,
some
like, how would that work if it did work? If that was the case, then you're saying something would happen like I explain my moral model to you, and you're instantly convinced, instantly compelled. You just start following it automatically, like it's like a some kind of hack into a human brain to make them to control them to be good. I mean, you would still have, I mean, ostensibly, even if God Himself is in your face telling you what is right and wrong, you're still going to have the free will to defy it. You can still say, "Why do I care what you say, God?" Right?
right. And then you would be rubbing up against absolutes, though. You wouldn't be rubbing up against something that's on the same exact precise level as you. So, like if you and I are in a room and we're both in the same category of being a temporarily existing bioorganism, you say stuff and I say stuff, and neither of us has any more import in what they're saying than the other, unless you start gathering a lot more people who are backing your view. And then, yeah, I mean, I suppose eventually it becomes a
But
matter of survival of the fittest, and you might have enough backing you
I think we've
to
abstracted this way too far. I think if we look at
maybe,
this in a realistic kind of way, then that doesn't even make sense at all, right? Like, let's say there's two of is you and me. We're on an island, right? We're both saying different things. I'm saying wash your hands after you use the bathroom, and you're saying why should I listen to you? Okay. At some point, you're gonna get sick, and you're gonna die, and you're gonna be like, I should have listened to you. Like there's a consequence that you're trying to avoid, right?
well,
The
maybe.
the statements that we make, the moral statements, they are reflections of real assessments. Like we're looking at real situations and saying, this is what will happen. This is the bad. This is the good. So it's not as simple as just they're even. Like there are actual consequences.
Yeah, but they're even in the sense that if we're on a stuck on a desert island, I may very well want to die.
Sure.
Yeah. So then all your pontificating about germ theory it won't impress me at the least bit. In fact, I might act against it on purpose to end my life quicker
All right. You
because
might
there's
want to
no.
be annihilated or sent to hell. You might want to be,
Yeah,
right?
because I mean, there'd be no universal imperative for me to stay alive, and if I just
So
think
there
it's
is no
time to
such thing.
go,
Even
yeah,
if God exists and he can tell you right from wrong and tells you that you'll burn in hell or be annihilated, and you say, I don't care if I'm annihilated or not, then there's no such thing as universal imperative, even with a God.
well, the universal imperative would be the thing you're acting against, and that's what would result in what we would, in common parlance, refer to as a judgment. That's the whole point. Is you'd
Okay,
be
so there's no
rubbing.
God. So there's no God in this. We're on the island. There's no, I'm telling you what you should and should not do. You don't care because you want to die. Either way, it's the same situation, right? Like you're just the you can choose to accept or reject the information towards this goal, which you do have. You do want to survive, even if like you conscientiously don't. Like your body is still breathing, your heart's still beating, you're still going to react to danger, you're still going to have fight or flight uh, responses. Your body still wants to survive, even if you don't. So I mean, it's not as simple as saying, "What if I want to die?"
Yeah, and it's also not as simple as that my body would still have those instinctual reactions, because then do we conclude that my body has those instinctual reactions because those are the end result of a very, very, very long series of happy accidents, or is it because I was created by God to live, and it's front loaded into me to preserve my life,
Well,
right? Because
that's a whole other problem.
well, yeah, I mean that's the whole point of this discussion, is that nothing is as simple as, and yeah, we could have come on here and just spat out a bunch of one-liners at each other, but like I'm saying again, I'm glad that we're digging into this level of detail, even if we don't resolve anything, to at least get a taste of this is why people have been discussing these things for millennia. It's not because they're easy.
Oh yeah, obviously. But if universal imperative is something that compels you automatically, I mean that seems kind of like how you're describing it when you're talking against non-theological forms of morality, right? You're saying like, why do I care? If I don't have to care, why would I care? So it doesn't matter. It's not real. But you don't have to care. It doesn't matter. It's not real if God says so either. Like, no matter what God tells you to do, you can always just not care.
Right. And this just goes back to the issue of that the difference is that in the one case, me not caring would be rubbing up against an absolute reality of a universal imperative, versus me not caring, not rubbing up against anything at all. Just maybe having to counteract some instinctual, accidental byproducts of neurochemistry that came about accidentally as well. I mean, that there's literally no problem with it. On the one case, there's no violation of anything. What are we doing on a desert island anyway?
Right. So we're on a desert island, and I say you should wash your hands before you use the bathroom. You say I don't care. I want to die. You're still rubbing up against the reality that germs exist and will infect your body if you don't wash your hands. You don't care, but the reality's still there.
Yeah, I mean, a reality that was not necessarily meant to be. It just came about the way it came about because that's just how it came about. So it's almost like that friction you talked about earlier. There would be no friction. There would just be me opting for B instead of A, and they're both completely subjective. So it's not like there's any kind of wrongdoing. There's no violation. There's nothing unethical about it. It would just be an accidentally existing ape that says, I guess I've had it. I don't want any more of this. Okay, well, there you go. Off you go.
Um, I'm not sure I understand what your point is there. Um, hey, Purple. I should shout out everybody in the chat real quick. Hey,
Yeah, go.
whoever's still left there, been. I'm just gonna shout out everybody has been here. How about that? Maya Atkinson, shout out to you. Pragmatic Crystal, shout out to you. Mark Reed, shout out to you. And I think that's it. Best in Show, shout out to you. And Purple Rhymes with Orange, who just joined us. Thank you, Purple, for being here.
And all of you, thank you for being here and sticking out with it. It's probably maybe a somewhat uncommon discussion, but probably the sort that should be had more often than I don't know. You're brainwashed. Oh yeah, you hate God and all whatever it may be. Incidentally, let me interrupt for just a second and ask if it'd be okay if we close out at the top of the hour.
The top of the hour, 9 p.m. I mean, we can close out now if you'd like, if you're ready to start heading out.
No,
I
I
think
mean
this
I
is
don't
gone
want
long
to
enough.
just cut it off.
We can go for another 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes.
Sounds good. Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's definitely been a interesting discussion thus far.
Okay, so where are we at right now? We're trying to figure out um, why you should care about what's right or wrong if there is no God.
Yeah, you had me excreting on a desert island.
Right. I mean, okay, so let's. I think that morality exists at a biological level. It comes into existence when things that are alive begin to exist. Once those things are able to, it's not even quite at the biological level. It's a little bit deeper than that. It's like when the when the life that exists is able to interact with itself. Like if there's just one amoeba here and another bacteria over there, and that's the only two life living things in the universe, morality hasn't come into existence yet, right? But the uh, once the living things start to interact with each other, there becomes better and worse ways of doing that for everybody to get what they want. Everybody wants something. There's all these desires, and morality is something like a mathematical function that puts all of them together into one single thing.
But I think the issue becomes that what is the better way to do it, and what is the worser way of doing it presupposes an absolute that would be the standard to which we're aiming when we say, "Hey, that one's better than that one."
Why does it
Without
have to
that,
be absolute?
well, because then without it, we're back at the issue that what you're calling better, I'm going to decide to call that the worst. Because if you're around taking up my resources and you're all happy because you're getting all fat of all the resources, and I'm saying, hey, I want more of that stuff, I'm going to get rid of you, and then I'll have it all, so that it just throws everything up into the air. Like the example of the Star Wars mythos is there's just will to power and just pointing fingers. Excuse me.
Okay, I think the best thing to do at this point in the conversation is to dig into the morality that we get from the Bible. Because I think that when we do that and we juxtapose that against other ideas of morality, we can see deficiencies in that morality which illustrate that it's not actually created by a divine being.
Well, of course, part of the issue will be to what you're referring by morality. So going
Yeah,
back to my
exactly. I gave a definition of good that I have. What is yours? How do you know that when God says something, it is actually good?
well, that is a fundamental level meta theological issue. Would
God's nature is
which
goodness.
um, yes, and it's not just an issue of generic God. Um, this, I think, would be best based on the traditional Christian view of God as a Trinity. And the reason that's important is that, for example, if we have a Unitarian God, say I don't know, Allah, the God of Islam. Okay, so since this is a being that has existed alone in all eternity, when it creates humanity, it has to, by definition, arbitrarily come up with a bunch of rules that humans are expected to follow,
No.
right? Hmm?
Why would it have to do that? Why could it just create the humans, let them do what they want?
Well, that would be a question for Unitarian um, theists. And I suppose that they would want to tell you something about how God is a God of who knows what they want to say, order or rules. But I know what you're, if I can read behind what you're saying, I think that you might be touching upon issues such as deism, right? Where a God creates, but then it's totally hands off.
I mean, it's
But
the Euthyphro dilemma, right? I mean, if goodness is something other than
right,
God, then God is totally superfluous.
yeah, and I think the Euthyphro dilemma is actually a false dichotomy. What I was getting at is if we have the Trinitarian God in view, then the difference is that relationship has been an ontological part of God eternally, because there's three persons in the Godhead, and they have been enjoying relationships for all eternity. So when God creates humanity, he doesn't have to arbitrarily make up stuff or say, hey, let's just whatever, let them do what they want. But since God is a relational being, he's put that, front loaded it into us. It's like you said, if there's only two beings on the planet and they're not interacting, maybe there's no what you call morality, because it's only when those things rub up against each other that there's issues that need to be ironed out, so that humanity would be front loaded with God's relational nature. And since God is unified, relationship, that relational nature would be based on being loving and conflict free, because God is one. So that's what the ethos would be. And on that view, the ethics would be being loving and without conflict, which of course rubs against the fact that this is a crazy fallen world, and it's just not going to be that simple, including because of what you said before, which is, hey, even if there's a universal imperative laid out by God, somebody can still say, yes, so what? I don't care. I do my own thing. I mean,
I
those are
mean,
just, yeah.
that wasn't my point. I was trying to co-opt your point. I mean, I think that there is a good and bad, whether there is a God or not. And saying I don't care is just, you know, is self-selecting yourself out of the pool of out of the community. You're saying I don't want to be part of the community, so you're not.
Well, but that's not on the moral level as I defined it. It's not quite that simple, because we have instances in human history where, for instance, an entire country decided that things were good that were to other countries very, very bad, and they led to world wars. I don't want to have YouTube bomb your video because I use certain terms they don't like, but you get you get what I'm saying.
Do I? um, I'm not sure if I do.
I mean, like I said, I'm Jewish, so that should give you an idea of what country I'm talking about and what epoch of history I'm talking about that led to a world war. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
When people are saying, "Hey, getting rid of people like me," that is a really good idea. It's going to free up resources. It's going to make it better for 90% of the population. Hey, why not? This is good. I mean, this is good stuff. Let's just get rid of a bunch of people. It's
Well,
good.
my definition,
Ultimately,
it
it's
wouldn't
for the
work
better
because
good.
by my definition of good, we're trying to promote the perpetual survival of all living things. That includes any subgroup of people or other creatures, right? So they just would be totally unacceptable by that definition of
Yeah,
goodness.
okay, so that's fine. Let's go with that. Okay, Chaz says it's unacceptable. Now it's you against their army. Let's see what happens next.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Might and right. See, the
Yeah.
God God's nature defines your goodness, and His might is what submits you to Him. So it is the might that makes it right to you.
Um, well, it is. I could see why you're saying that, but there's a whole other aspect of it, which is that it's my love for him that makes me understand that he's a little bit smarter than I am, and he might know a little bit better than I do. And I mean, as a dad, honestly, just the fact of becoming a dad, that has taught me more theology than any book ever has, in my interaction with my kids and my laying down absolute laws for them to follow, and having them sometimes choose not to, and them not understanding why I was laying out certain laws until they got older. And all these is very, really, honestly, interesting issues that come up when you're dealing with kids that are just, uh, they're just so raw, right? Especially in
Yeah,
the
I think
earlier years, they're so raw that they feel an emotion, they're going to yell and cry. They don't care where they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult to raise kids, especially in a world where everybody else has a different idea than you about what's right and wrong. But I try to teach my kids the reasons why things are right or wrong, and I give them
Right.
my definition of goodness, and I try to illustrate how the things that we all agree are wrong don't go with that. Like, you know, racism, bigotry, usury, all these different things. They don't promote the perpetual survival of all living things. So,
Right. So, see, that's an interesting metaphor in that, for all intents and purposes, in that scenario, you are God. You are the God of your kids, especially at the earlier stages before they start being able to be more self sufficient. So, for example, I can remember telling my kids, "Oh, you want to go play in the front yard? Well, okay, but I have to be there with you." And then later on, a few years or however long passes, okay, you want to play in the front yard? Go ahead, go out there by yourself, but you're not allowed to cross the street. And then a little time goes by, and okay, you're allowed to go out by yourself. You're allowed to cross the street, but here's how you do it. You look both ways, blah blah blah. And then eventually, the younger one also can go out there with the older one. And then, if they want to cross the street, you hold the older one's hands, and all these
but they're
rules
not
that I would make.
arbitrary. They're all well founded rules, right?
Yes,
Like, you don't play in the yard by yourself because there are freaking weirdos out there. You don't go in the street because there's freaking cars out there. You know.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that's the point. They're not arbitrary, but they may be tentative. They may be situational. They may be relative to the situation. See, that's this crazy interaction, like we were talking about, between morality and ethics, is the absolute versus the, well, how on earth do we apply this, right? How do we
I mean,
understand it?
the individual rules they change with the context, but ultimately they all have the same point, which is keep the kid alive.
Yes, but you know, it's back to the issue of why is that a universal imperative? Besides that, because thus saith calves.
I mean, I don't think it is universal. I think it's just biological. It's just the fact that we are living things, and we have the instinct to survive, and survival instinct creates all of it.
Yes. So again, we're relying on the byproduct of an accident that, for some odd reason, just so happens to happen to create um, a survival instinct in us. And then some of us seem to enjoy that enough that we're subjectively willing to go with it. That's about as far as we can take it.
I mean, it's something that we all share. It's a it's it's a through line for all of us. It's a unifying force. It is the creation of a community, the greatest community possible. The power comes from numbers, right? Strength in numbers, right? The greatest, most powerful community is the community with the greatest number, and the greatest number community is the one that allows the most individuals
No,
within it.
yeah,
So,
I mean, I don't know about that. That's another very, very difficult issue, that we might have a smaller community that's actually a lot better off in terms of health
yeah,
and
it
ethics
literally
than
you
a
can't
much
have a
larger
community with
one.
literally with everyone, because there are people,
Yeah,
there are individuals that want to work against the community, who are just stuck on selfish,
right,
right?
right.
So they select themselves out, we select them out, whatever it is, right? But we want to get the maximum number possible, as many people in our community as possible, to be as powerful as possible, so we can accomplish our goals. And our goal is survival. So the most number of people is anybody that we can get in there. If you're on the same page, we can bring you in. When we create other divisions, like, race, or gender, or whatever other arbitrary nationality, blah blah blah, all these other small groups are inherently limited, and therefore just not capable of producing the power that we need. We want the biggest community possible, so all life has to be included.
And we might want the largest community possible to be able to fight against those who oppose it and would bring it down.
Right, those who don't want our survival.
Yeah, but again, that's turning the happenstantial byproduct of an accident. We're turning it into a sort of God, the standard, the absolute, the universal, the imperative that we should all strive towards. And if you don't, then you're going to have big trouble with us. So let me, I hate to do this, but being about 10 till the top of the hour, is there kind of some wrap up stuff that you usually do on your shows?
Wrap up stuff. Well, I'll just let you guys. If anybody's in the chat wants to ask a question, just tag me at Atheist Edge. We're about to wrap it up any moment now. So if you would like to do that, and I guess we'll continue this conversation another time, Ken, if you'd be up for that.
Yeah,
And
no, this has been really fascinating, and I
all right, I
think
appreciate it.
important. Yeah, I think
I do too.
important to. Yeah.
I did also put Ken's website in the description.
Oh,
Truefreethinker.com.
well, thanks.
Uh,
Thanks so much for doing that.
and that is there on the screen too under his name if you are confused about that at all. And I
Yeah.
guess that's it. I do have another conversation coming up next week. We're going to be talking about socialism with Dr. Ben Burgess. So definitely subscribe, like the video if you have enjoyed it, if you want to see more conversations. Other than that, that's all I really have for y'all tonight. So thank you so much. And remember, it's the bridges we build, not the bridges we burn, that give us the edge. Y'all have a great night.